All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amanda Scott. I'm the Senior Director here at Capture Higher Ed. I will be interviewing today Jack Klett, who is the Director of Recruitment at Jefferson, who is a partner of Capture Higher Ed. And before I get started on our presentation, I want to do a couple of housekeeping items. All of your lines are muted at this point, so if you have a question, in order to send that over to us, please navigate on your control panel to where you see the hand raised, and you should be able to find the chat box at the very bottom, and type a message there. You can type the message to the entire audience or the organizers only, or organizers and panelists. If you're trying to send a question to me or Jack, our presenters today, please make sure that you send that either to the entire audience or to the organizers only, because we have a group of folks who are helping us monitor our questions so that we don't miss anything that you have to ask us today. So if we have any live tweeters out there in the Twitterverse, am I aging myself by not knowing what to call the Twitterverse? Please go to, you can tweet at us at Capture Higher Ed and use the hashtag GradRecruit. When we were at NAGAP, we had a live tweeter out there, so just wanted to throw that option out there. We're happy for you to do that, and we will engage with you as well. Today, we will be distributing the slide deck at the end of the presentation, so if you have some stats that we're speaking of that you want to keep for yourself or look up, we have also 2 full slides at the end of the presentation of resources that we've used. Those will be yours to have. We'll make sure and get them over to you. So our presentation today will be no longer than 45 minutes, leaving about 10 to 15 minutes to move forward with some questions. So given that, I'm going to introduce myself and then also introduce Jack, and then we'll move into our content. So I am Amanda Scott, and like I said, I'm a Senior Director at Capture, but my background is on campus at universities. I worked at Mars Hill University as the Director of Financial Aid in my last seated position. And I left financial aid and did not go to jail after a couple of audits, and I'm pretty proud of that, right? And I worked my way back over into the admissions sphere, and I have been working on the client side of consulting for the last 6 years and marketing for higher education in the last 2.5 at Capture Higher Ed, working with primarily our software products that aid in recruiting for undergrad, grad, online, you name it, even university advancement. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm going to talk to you about Jack now. So Jack, he has specialized in university enrollment management, but his experience in higher ed has been very diverse. His first journey took him from being an associate dean to the private sector and an innovative startup. I'll give you a hint there. That's Capture. Currently, he leads the undergrad, grad, international, and transfer recruitment efforts for Jefferson, which Jefferson he will talk about as a merger of Philadelphia University and Thomas Jefferson University. Since transitioning from his role as constituent service coordinator for Congressman Rush Holt of New Jersey, he has served 5 universities as both in administrative and teaching roles: Rider University, Drexel University, Philadelphia University, Westchester University, and now Jefferson. Prior to serving Jefferson, he was a senior enrollment advisor at Capture Higher Ed, and that's where Jack and I were colleagues together. And he has been working to shape recruitment campaigns through software as a service. So in that, Jack's going to bring some of his teaching experience to us today by talking about how to manage innovative people and teams, business model innovation, work, industry and work will all be brought in with his background in political science, where he got his graduate degree from Villanova University. So that is a really good amp up, Jack, to have some high expectations of you today.
That's okay. Thanks for the introduction, Amanda. It is great to be back with you again. Hello, everybody, and I just want you to know it is a beautiful day in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
That is awesome. It is cold in Iowa. Imagine that. So I just introduced us. That's a little bit of what we look like. I don't know if Jack has shaved since that picture, but I have since chopped my hair off. Since I've had a couple of kids, I had to get a mom do. So let's move into our content here. The first thing that we want to talk about are identifying the challenges across multiple data points for graduate and professional studies. So of course we looked at the study for from the Council of Graduate Schools, their 2017 Pressing Graduate Survey, and it said this is the beginning of 2017. So these are their predictions. You know that in the next 12 months, 80% of institutions are likely to create one or more graduate degree programs. I mean, that is so prevalent. When I was at Mars Hill, the last year I left, we created our first grad degree program there, changing it from a college to a university. 40% of those institutions, though, will not eliminate one or more programs. So what that's saying is 80% are going to be adding a new program, and 40% of them are not going to unload any programs at the same time. So it's not just a swap, one program for another. It's a cumulative add. And then 80% of those are going to have to adopt new student recruitment strategies to enhance the diversity and inclusiveness on their campuses. That theme will be really brought out within our talk today about how to enhance diversity, what the trends are internationally, et cetera, with our political sphere, as a little prelude to what we'll talk about. And then 72% of those will also be promoting graduate student diversity. So that's obviously a big theme, both in the data and how we're going to try to talk about how to address it.
Yeah, and Amanda, if I could just say about those last 2 points, that's particularly important given the decline in international enrollment, which we're going to be talking about. It also speaks to the need for a real socioeconomic focus that speaks differently to key audiences. And that's more of a traditional view of diversity, but this also speaks to occupational diversity of our programs, sending institution diversity, et cetera. So we'll touch on a lot of that today.
The CGS survey also spoke of what are graduate deans spending their time on. So obviously in the data, the diversity, like we just said, they're spending their time on that. They're also obviously leading their team, which was the leadership of graduate enrollment professionals, and then also institutional resources, making sure that you have the funds and the budget in place and allocating those budget items, both your human and fiscal resources, into the right places, is something that's top of mind for graduate deans.
Yeah, it really speaks to competing investment priorities, investment in existing programs, our legacy graduate programs, and then investment in new programs, investing in the presence of new markets, and also in program development.
Perfect. So another data source that we're going to be looking at is the NSC Research Center. That's the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center. And why I put this graph on here, I know it's a little bit blurry and hard to see because I took it out of their study, but it's important to see where across the data points the variances lie. You can see that the 4-year for-profit industry and the 2-year publics are skewing data points low when you're looking at current term overall enrollment estimates for the fall of 2017. So whereas across the industry, there on the next slide we'll look at across the industry, there is a negative tilt to enrollment growth. You really have to look at what sector you're speaking to, because looking at the 4-year public, it's a 0.2 negative decline, and the 4-year private nonprofit is at a 0.2 point for negative decline. So the data is going to show a larger decrease across enrollment pools, but just know what sector of the industry that you are in to be able to understand how that is overall affecting you. So again, looking at across the entire industry, that's -1 across all sectors, and then broken out up to a -7, that's a 7 there, for a 4-year for-profit, and the decline of overall post-secondary enrollment. So that's including undergrad enrollment as well. And then we're going to speak to the graduate side of it as well. So the challenges in grad and professional recruitment that we're going to speak to today are the political and economic climate. This really speaks into it speaks into Jack's background in political science. The increased competition, we spoke to how there are increases in number of programs, so that's bringing in extra competition. Then shaping the class is not just the academic profile, it's now the diversity profile of your class as well. Organic lead generation, as we work with graduate partners, that's one of the most popular things that they're looking to do is build up that inquiry pool, because not all grad programs have strong suspect pools that they can pull from. And then limited resources, like we said, that's one of the top 3 items that deans are spending their time on. So we want to touch on that as well. So the political and economic climate. Okay, Jack, put on your political scientist hat and explain to me what this beautiful diagram here means.
I will, and thank you all for bearing with me for this. We will get into real examples of recruitment strategies here, but I think this is important to kind of provide the context of what we're talking about. So I teach business model innovation, and what you see at the very center of this slide here is Alex Osterwalder's business model canvas from his great book, Business Model Generation. So I highly recommend it. I know it's talking about business models, but it actually is very informative and applicable to our daily work in graduate enrollment management. So basically, a business model speaks to how we create value, how we deliver value, and how we capture value. And it also applies, like I said, to graduate enrollment management. I view this business model canvas really as our GEM organizational model. So we as graduate enrollment management professionals, every day we are creating value in our products and in our students. We are delivering value through the education the students receive, and we capture value in terms of the net tuition revenue a student provides our institutions, and then also in the positive student contributions that are provided through our enrollments. So there is much in our business kind of organizational model that we can control, but there are also all of these uncontrollable environmental factors that are exerting pressure on our organizations. And that's what you see on the outside of this business model canvas. So there are political and regulatory environmental factors that we see in terms of government policies. And I know Amanda's going to be talking a little bit about the challenges that we have faced in the graduate space recently as it comes to governmental legislation. Beyond that, we have the social and cultural environmental factors. And this is really important as we begin to take a look at some of those social aspects that are impacting us in terms of some of our international recruitment and some other factors. There's always an economic environment that we are a part of. And that's what we see in terms of good versus bad economies and their impacts on folks' desire to seek a graduate education, to retool or to advance or to increase salary. So we'll see exactly what that means for the graduate market space. And then there is the physical environment. So I'm going to give a quick example for this. because Amanda alluded to it. I am at Jefferson, which is now a merger of Philadelphia University and Thomas Jefferson University. So physically, we have two campuses, one in beautiful East Falls, Philadelphia, and then one also in Center City, Philadelphia. And it was really an interesting challenge to really message about what Jefferson, the new Jefferson, is, because on the one hand, Jefferson in the Philadelphia region is known as a tremendous health medical institution because it's part of a $6.5 billion Jefferson health system. And Jefferson's motto for a long period of time was, "Health is all we do." And then you bring in this Philadelphia University campus where we have tremendous areas of excellence in architecture and business and engineering and design. So it was really interesting to try to message what the new Jefferson was while backing away from this understanding that health is all we do, because now at the new Jefferson, we are so much more than just health. But at the bottom line, where we've landed is that we do improve lives by redefining humanly possible. So this just gives you an example of the various environmental factors that are exerting pressure on us that we have to deal with in our daily work.
Perfect. Thank you, Jack. That's a great example. And in this current climate, there are so many different mergers that are happening every day that we see inside higher ed. It seems like either another school is closing or they're merging with someone else. So we have to be very mindful to those. So there's also some problems that we've been facing with the political and economic climate, and I'm going to talk about a couple of those. And Jack and I are going to interweave in some of the solutions that we have found. For instance, there was a proposed tax reform for graduate school waivers recently, as of last year, and it took a union of graduate students actually going against this waiver that they were trying to put into place that would then make graduate students who were trying to, just fund their education with grants, it made them have to pay taxes on that. So those are problems that you don't necessarily foresee cropping up, but then when you're trying to recruit in students and they think, oh, well, if I get a grad assistantship, I'm now going to be taxed on it, that becomes quickly a barrier to entry into graduate programs, which is something that you're going to have to move around with your messaging. Another one that's out there right now, we've had a couple of we spoke to this with our Capture Notes series, is the Prosper Act as well, which has several repercussions that could change just tremendously federal student aid. It is kind of taking like all diversified aids and dumping it into a couple of different buckets. So all grants will be in a grant bucket and all loans will be in a loan bucket. I know that's kind of dumbing it down, but that's really how different it's going to make it. There's not going to be separate Perkins loans, et cetera. But it's also moving into, for the graduate professionals, it's making it so that students don't have as many loan forgiveness options available out there to them. So in programs where typically you could go through a grad program and then no, I do air quotes, that you could have some forgiveness options out there, those might not be out there. So think about your medical programs, your dental, your veterinary, where you go out, especially your professional programs that have some large sticker prices on them. And the Prosper Act could definitely change that. So please keep your eye on that. We have no political stance on it, but it is something that is going to affect graduate recruitment. Do you have anything on those two items, Jack?
No, I think you've pretty much nailed it. I think that the big thing to be aware of is that we need to be aware of these things and we need to advocate. And you referenced the importance of current graduate students and really pushing back on these things. And we also really need to thank the work of NAGAP and the Council of Graduate Schools for also lobbying to make sure that we're able to continue to provide wonderful, quality, and affordable options for graduate students.
Right. And as with most things that cost more money, education continues to increase across most institutions. We know that there are some institutions that have been able to stabilize their price, but it does seem over time to be increasing across the board. And at the same time, 4 out of 10 schools are seeing a drop in international enrollment. And Jack, you had a really specific example where this came up at a international conference.
Yes, and I'm sure some of my colleagues here who have joined us today were there. I spent all of last week at the NAFSA conference, the International Educators Association conference that was hosted here in Philadelphia, so it made it very convenient for us. But I was really struck by the conversations I had from folks who were representing institutions abroad as we talked about the viewpoint of the United States as a place where international students want to come and study. And what I was struck by was just the caution that folks are feeling abroad in coming to study in the United States, not only because of what is happening in our political space at the moment, but also because of, and it shouldn't have been surprising to me, I probably should have thought of it, but the thinking of the thoughts around safety in the United States. We've been through a period of mass shootings and tragic situations in the United States, and those are heavily covered abroad. And folks have some real concerns about their safety coming to the United States. So it is a challenge right now in terms of the international student environment. But it was great to see that there were tens of thousands of folks at the NAFSA conference who were working every day to push back and to make sure that people understand that this is indeed a very welcoming place for international students to study.
Right, and our specialty at Capture and my background has been in how do you shift your messaging to prospective students to be able to make them see this as they're thinking of enrolling at your institution. So one thing that we did at one of our partners, University of Toledo, is they were working to bring in international students from India. So if a student from India appeared on their .edu site, we would change the visual banner. You can just do that as an image swap behind the scenes. Toledo did nothing. And then when that student from India appears on the Toledo site, they can see someone that looks like them, that is a student there, that makes it look like it's a more welcoming place for someone from their country, their region, their nationality, etc. And then after we're targeting that student, we can then follow up with testimonials from the international clubs or any other services that would serve that group. Because I know that working with international students is very different because they do want to have that sense of community, of people like them, even if they are here for an American experience, whether it be a break in the schedule, having people who could still be around on campus or in the area to have that community with. So being able to put those the visuals and the right testimonials and messaging in front of this group is very important in influencing their opinion of not just your institution, but of the United States.
Yeah, I think the Toledo example is a great example. And I mean, what we're really talking about here when we're talking about image swaps and those types of things really is a wonderful software that allows us to take the student's visit experience on our institution's website, and based on their visit behaviors, message to them accordingly. All of us have these wonderful CRMs, and we have a great one, and they're really, really helpful. They help us to set up our sequenced communications, where we have set messages ready to go out based on a certain period of time. But those are what I refer to as static campaigns. They're getting out the messages that we want, but they're not necessarily in tune with the message that the student is ripe to receive at that moment. So by being able to use this software, we here at Jefferson have been able to create a communications plan that resonates with the student based on their actual behavior on our site. What is it that they are looking for? You raised a great point about if the student is from abroad, being able to then use dynamic content and marketing automation to provide information and to provide certain messaging. And we do that here. If a student is from abroad and they're visiting, the system recognizes that they are not in the United States and is tailoring a message to them accordingly through student stories and testimonials. And that's really, really powerful. It's all about the right message at the right time when the student is ready and willing to receive it.
Jack, we have a question from John Cairns, and we're happy to feed in questions if it goes with our topic as we go here. He's asking, what CRM are you using to be able to target messages in this way?
So the CRM that I use here at Jefferson is Salesforce, but the specific software that I'm referencing that allows us to use student visit behavior on the website and then tailor messages accordingly, that software is the Capture Behavioral Engagement Software, or CBE for short, and it's a really valuable and complementary tool.
Thank you. That was another question from Noah Price on which software you're using. So thank you for explaining both who your CRM is and what marketing automation platform that you're using, which would be Captures. So moving past the political and economic climate, there's also increased competition. This is a trend from PharmCast, which is the application system for pharmacy programs. And programs are increasing, yet applications are decreasing. And that is creating this increased competition. And I heard from one of my colleagues that the PharmCast system has even changed a little bit. Their application system has changed them so that now they used to be able to select to send to like 5 schools all at the same time. Like you go in and you apply for pharmacy school and you pick your top 5 schools and it automatically goes to those schools. And now the student has to submit their application 5 separate times to those 5 individual students, which is really increasing application rates. So that's another one of those external factors being the application system that you're using. And from coming from undergrad, think about the Common App as well and how that really changed application volumes as well. And this is showing where the increase is there, but the applications are decreasing. So let's talk about how that's affecting, oops, that's the wrong direction.
No, I think you're good there, Amanda. I think it just, we might have had a title issue.
Yes, I think so too. Sorry about that. So this right here is going to speak to the increased competition. So the existing pipelines are tending to dry up in some ways, and alternatives are needed. Existing pipelines could be perhaps you can buy lists for your programs. Those are still a valid source, but we're needing to move a little bit beyond our traditional means of being able to have prospects come into our system. And we're forcing this pressure to make up for the losses in the undergrad programs. And that's case in point why when I was at Mars Hill, they added in their grad program was to begin to increase the enrollment in that area to help make up for the loss of the undergrad program. So I think, Jack, you have some excellent examples of how you've increased, dealt with competition, both with your internal and external feeder networks, and then we can talk to some specific marketing strategies that can be used as well.
Sure, and actually I am glad that the political and economic climate is still there on this slide, because I think it does tie into this. We're in a period of time where there is a good economy. and because of that, and you take a look at the unemployment rate being around 3.8%, there are now actually, I saw something this morning that showed that there are now more available jobs than there are people to fill them who are actually looking for a job. So in this good economic climate, we do tend to see an impact on those who are wishing to come back and retool. When the economy is poor and people are worried about their positions or they're out of work, they're looking about new skill sets that they can acquire and how to make themselves more marketable. So there is an opportunity for us, though. And one of the things that we did here at Jefferson is we created a program called Jefferson Rise. Jefferson Rise was designed to be an internal feeder program. So basically what we did we went through and took a look at all the students who were graduating from our traditional undergraduate programs and also our continuing and professional education undergraduate programs. And we came up with a select cohort of about 300 of them. And working with individual program directors, so our academic partners here in graduate studies, we were able to pre-admit these students into graduate programs that aligned with their experience in undergrad. So we basically were able to go to our existing students who were graduating and giving them an opportunity to rise into graduate study. I have to tell you that this was the pilot. This was the first year that we did this. We made it an amazing show on campus. There were Jefferson Rise branded things everywhere. Even coffee sleeves from the local Starbucks had Jefferson Rise logos on them. And it created a lot of buzz around our graduate programs and our graduate offerings. And it made this group of undergraduate students really excited about the fact that they were selected to be a part of this group. And we had tremendous results with keeping students as part of the Jefferson family. Our goal necessarily was never to convince someone to pursue graduate study who wasn't already considering it, but I did want to give students an opportunity to pause and to really consider whether or not they wanted to continue with graduate study here at Jefferson. So the Jefferson Rise program was perfect for that. So we will be continuing and expanding that this coming fall 19 cycle. And also external feeder networks. Amanda, we talked, I think, at NAGAP about an example of the Sustainable Business Network here in Philadelphia.
Right.
In Philadelphia, we have this organization, Sustainable Business Network. This is a group of Philadelphia business owners who are committed to sustainability. We have a program here, a Master of Science program in Sustainable Design. We were able to partner with the Sustainable Business Network to create a feeder program, provide a tuition discount for these students, and provide them with a really nice pathway into that program. That is one example of the types of ways that we can really leverage like-minded organizations and even some like-minded corporations, even abroad, institutions abroad, into partnering with us with our programs that really align with their values and mission.
Those are great examples, Jack, of how you build both internal and external feeder networks. And it was funny, after the NAGAC presentation, Jack was like the celebrity talking about the Jefferson Rise program that he put into place. So feel free to ask him any questions on those now or later. I think you might be submitting that as a topic for a future session there.
Indeed,
indeed. Because it was so popular. Yes. Additional things that we can do to go against the increased competition is, I'll give you an example of a political race that happened here in my neighborhood, in my neck of the woods, and the results came through last night. I had a friend whose husband was running for Congress, and then he was beat out by another lady, and we unfortunately did not see any commercials for him at all on our local network. At all, and the lady who had a couple of commercials out there won, and my husband said, "Oh, that's too bad that your friend's husband didn't make it." And I'm like, well, the marketing just wasn't there. I mean, with the increase in competition with education or anything, you really have to do more than just knock on doors. You have to make sure you're using the right channels of marketing to get out in front of people and the way that they're looking at you. And what we're finding right now with incoming students, whether that be at the undergrad level or the grad level, online programs, and surprisingly enough with alumni as well, is that where you find them is on your website. A lot of them are coming to you, and you need to be able to capture them and be able to communicate with them specifically with a message that resonates what they're looking at. So whether that's seeing if they've hit, 3 different grab pages and they're sunk into a specific program, targeting them with a piece of what we call dynamic content. That could be a toaster, a popover, an image swap, a progressive form fill to capture their name that's specific to them, that's specific to their program. And then after identifying who they are, following them with messaging on their subsequent visits to your site, even sending them triggered text messages or triggered direct mail based off of their website experience, is really how you can get around that competition, is taking advantage of the people that are already coming to you, but in a stealth fashion.
Yeah, and I know we have to move along here, but I'll tell you that the tech space, in terms of its impact on marketing, is just changing so rapidly. We were talking about the Hanover report that had come out, I think, about 4 years ago, that was talking about graduate recruitment strategies. And what was fascinating was that digital display, marketing automation, that was nowhere in that document. So here we are 4 years later with such a focus on digital marketing automation, dynamic content. So the space is just changing quickly, and it's just a matter of how do we leverage those in as rapid a fashion as possible to make sure that we're still competitive.
Absolutely. We'll move forward to shaping the class. And like I said earlier, shaping the class is not just changing the academic profile of your group. It is working to change the quality, whether that means that you want to bring in someone from an MBA program that has been out in the field for a couple of years. And we all know that bringing in someone that is out in the field is harder to find and recruit to than someone who is coming right from the undergrad space. Also changing that diversity profile, whether that means ethnicity-wise or internationally. Those are all problems with shaping the class that we need to be able to address. And our pools are becoming more and more hyper-competitive, like we talked about with applicant pools. It really depends on the program. You cannot make a generalization across all grad and professional programs on the competitive nature, but we do know what the overall trends are telling us in terms of competitiveness. So some of the solutions here, Jack, do you want to speak to a couple that you've found with shaping your class?
I do. I'll use an example with, we have a master's program in disaster medicine and management here, and I'll use that as an example, and folks can extrapolate on how they might use this strategy with some of their own programs. So when we talk about shaping the class, the disaster medicine and management program is really looking for occupational diversity. So it's a program that attracts ER docs, ER nurses, EMT populations, but also crisis preparedness professionals. So think more like FEMA types at the federal, state, and local levels. So you have all these different folks who have very different occupational backgrounds, all looking at the same program. Well, in the past, we would talk about all the value propositions of the program and provide a very broad message and hope people would kind of take from it what they wish. And the power of marketing automation and this type of software allows you to be so much more nuanced. So to give you an example, we're able to take established lists of these professionals and we load them into this software database. And in so doing, we actually can assign a different star system, a different star metric to folks in each of these occupations. So our ER docs might get 1 star, our FEMA types might get 3 stars. So what this does is as your prospective student is coming to the website to view information about this program, the system is able to marry their bio demo information with their personal IP address or their personal display device ID. And the system recognizes, oh, this is John Doe. He has 3 stars. Therefore, I should be feeding information to this student, prospective student, that really speaks to the value proposition of this program around crisis preparedness. So that's just an example. And obviously, if the ER doc is on the site, the system recognizes that that ER doc is on the site and speaks. Think that that is just a quick example of the way in which you can leverage the STAR system and marketing automation in a really contemporary, creative way.
That's a really great example. We're going to move through our last couple of slides here, which is our last 2 topics, and then we can open the floor up completely. But if you have any questions that you want to ask to get our queue full as we move into our question and answer period, please go ahead and submit those into us. We're going to talk about organic lead generation. So here's the really fun part of working as, and I'm preaching to the choir, so to speak, as problems that graduate programs have, and that is coming up with organic lead sources. That's also a problem with online, and a lot of grad programs are online and with non-traditional age students. So it's kind of just swirled all together as something that's important. So 72% of students are actually on your website before they have decided to apply to your institution. And name sources like GMAT, GRE, LSAT, you name it, all of the professional testing type pre-tests, a lot of the time are used as to fulfill an entrance requirement and not necessarily as the first step in the student decision journey, which is a little bit different than like with undergrad, where you have a sophomore or a junior testing way before they have decided what their top 3 schools are to attend. So some of the solutions that we have put into place, I spoke quickly of progressive identification. What that is the ability to target on screen after a certain program's viewing history, a form fill that's very minimal to get just what basic information that we need from that person to begin tracking their journey on your website and subsequent visits to your website. And we found that very effective with our grad campaigns in terms of finding organic leads for them.
Yeah. When you're using behavioral engagement software, basically, once the code is placed on your website, there's a tagging process. I know I'm kind of getting in the weeds here, but it's important. So the tagging process identifies, for instance, graduate academic pages. So basically, if a visitor is coming at Jefferson, this is the rule that we have. If a visitor is coming to 2 or more, they view 2 or more graduate tagged academic pages, then we have a short form fill, a short PID, progressive identification form that pops up. And we know that folks are 20% more likely to complete a short form fill than some of the very long inquiry forms that a lot of us have had traditionally on our website. So this uses visit behavior to trigger the short form fill, and is also in a format that allows for more form fill data.
And it also allows you to know who that person is on their 2nd and 3rd and 4th and 5th visit back, because it appends that information with that specific person.
That's exactly right. So we're doing a search campaign right now in grad. So we've gone to our traditional sources of the GMAT search service, GMAS, and the GRE search by. we've loaded those into a graduate campaign, and we're doing some email marketing to them with the hope that they are clicking on links and therefore identifying, right, marrying that bio demo information. So I'm able to actually use the GMAT and GRE lists and those purchases in a very different way than I used to, a way that is providing me with far more prospects than I would have had traditionally.
The final thing that we're going to talk about is limited resources. And we all understand why our resources are limited. I'm going to frame the problem in something that Jack said to me early on in our work together. This was probably a couple years ago, and he said, when I was in graduate enrollment, this is as he worked at Capture, he said, I had 20% of the budget with the exact same enrollment goal. Is that true, Jack?
Yeah, it was very close. So I had 20% of the resources, and not just budget, Amanda, also human, right? Also human resources. The undergrad staff had 10, 12 counselors, and we had 3. And I'm sure everyone can identify with this who's joined us. So the pain points of being in graduate enrollment.
Well, I'm going to pick my favorite solution here for us to focus on, so that we can move into questions. So go ahead and write any questions that you have in now, and we'll get to those. But predictive scoring is how we at Capture, both with our own campaigns that we run and on campus, how our partners are utilizing their own CRM is through our predictive scores that we have through Capture Behavioral Engagement. You can see here as the third bullet down, CAI and CES. That's a lot of acronyms to mean Capture Affinity Index and Capture Engagement Score. The Capture Affinity Index is the lifetime value that we give a person based on their lifetime visits to your website. The engagement score is a 7-day window of someone's interest on the website. So we could show someone that both has a very quick interest on your site and has no previous browsing history. You can kind of use those knobs in different ways. And how we use that is to be able to tell on a daily basis, based on their engagement score, when someone comes to your site. So every single day, graduate recruitment counselors are able to have a list of people who are on their site that are identified in the last 24 hours and able to see their affinity index as well as the 5-star system that Jack talked about, like an ER doctor might be a 5-star for your program, and being able to marry that so that your human resources are able to scale their outreach, and then also your physical resources like direct mail, digital display spend, etc. Jack, do you have any other quick thoughts on that while we move into questions?
Yeah, just that the Capture Affinity Index and the Capture Engagement Score, it is so helpful for a limited team. When you have a limited team and you have programs with hundreds of prospective students, how do you know which student to reach out to when? And the CAI scores and CES scores are so helpful to create a metric, a true metric based on that prospective student's actual visit behavior on your site that allows you to know this person is ready to receive a personal one-on-one relationship building message from me at this time. Super helpful.
Jack, I'm going to ask you a question now. We're going to move into a couple questions. You had just mentioned a statistic of long form versus short form, and you've been on both sides of the seat. Have you found any difference in quality? This is looking at Jason Hamill's question here of conversion rates of a short form versus a long form. He's saying, generating more leads is good, but if the quality is going to go down, that's going to stress out an already thin admission staff, and we at Capture absolutely agree with that. And we are not about quality, we're about quality, not just about quantity. So talk to us from your perspective on your Capture leads versus other organic sources.
Sure. So I'll talk to you about my experience, and you can make your own judgment about this. But we had a very expensive relationship with a lead generation provider who was delivering to us "quote unquote" qualified leads. So these are folks who at least told this third party that they were very much interested in our programs. And of course, trying to be the good enrollment management professionals that we are, we source code things, providing origin source so we can ultimately evaluate. And the prospective information that comes in through the PID, through the short form fill, converts at a far higher rate than anything that we received from this other third party vendor who was doing lead generation and acquisition for us, to the point where we will no longer be working with that particular vendor next year. That actually saved us enough money to pay for this particular behavioral engagement software 2 times over. So that is super helpful for us.
Thank you, Jack. I'm going to ask you another thing from your perspective of being a partner. Are these tools difficult to set up? Was your IT involved? What about connecting to your CRM for data integration? I'm going to start with an answer that, and then turn it to you, that for any partner that we bring in, our goal is to move to an integration, but we start with a flat file so that we can get everything moving as quickly as possible. But yes, an integration is definitely what we want to have between systems. And then tech is involved, but that is to place a small piece of code on your website that is similar to Google Analytics. So if you can do Google Analytics, you can do Capture's code. And are they difficult to set up? That's subjective. I'm going to turn that one to you, Jack.
Yeah, so I like to explain it this way because I am asked this question a lot by folks who are interested in this this type of software. And that is to say that the difficulty that I actually have in terms of time is how to leverage all the data that this actually gives me in a smart way, because I feel like I leave so much on the table every day. So the setup is very easy. And obviously I have a relationship with Capture. I'm using Capture Behavioral Engagement. Capture connected with our web team. They place the code that Amanda referenced on the site. Capture then goes through and tags all of your pages. You provide Capture with your branding materials, your style guide, a library of photos. And then you sit with someone, you talk about your goals of what you want to get out of various campaigns. And there are folks who kind of help you with the different types of things that you can do. And then there is a design team on Capture's end that puts all that stuff together. They present it to us through something called Basecamp, which folks are probably familiar with. And we go through an approval and revision process, and then it launches. There really isn't anything that my team has to write or design. It's all done through the software as a service.
We have a couple of additional questions, but we are getting close down to the mark of 4 minutes to go to the end of our presentation. Before I get to that very end, I want to make sure and thank everyone for attending today. There are a couple of questions, one about use of GRE scores and another about the Jefferson Rise program. For the folks who asked those questions, I'm going to send those over to Jack and ask him kindly to connect with you with an answer to those questions. We have references that were requested at the very beginning of our presentation, 2 pages worth of them. So anything that we've talked about today has been well studied, and we welcome you to look at the references that we have in place here. As a follow-up to this, we are going to distribute this presentation to everyone who attended today, as well as we will have a copy of this PowerPoint accessible as well. with the one header corrected in it, which just kills me. We had a header wrong. I do apologize. That happened changing it from our NAGAP version of the PowerPoint. I like Excel, you guys, not PowerPoint. Let's just be honest. And and then finally, we're also going to send you a blog preview. We have a graduate and professional studies blog that goes out on a weekly basis, a blog digest. And we have a guest author, Stephanie Miller from St. Mary's College in California. And she was in our NAGAP presentation, and she wrote up notes from our session, which will be featured in the summer issue of Perspective magazine. So she has allowed us to put that into a blog, which is going to be shared with you guys today and then available within our blog next week. So thank you, or not next week, tomorrow. So thank you to everyone who has attended. Please know that you can reach out to both of us directly. My personal email address is ascott@capturehighered.com. That's ascott@capturehighered.com. Any questions that were not answered here fully today, I will go through and answer them for you as well. And Jack, thank you for being our guest and our partner and for working with us here today.
It was my pleasure, Amanda. I'm happy to do it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.